If your candles or diffusers aren't performing as well as they used to, there's a very good chance you're not imagining it. Some suppliers will tell you nothing has changed, but the reality is one of the oldest tricks in the fragrance industry is quietly lowering the strength of your oil every time you reorder. And most product makers never find out until their sales start dropping. I'm Shane McGrath. I co-founded Ecoya, one of Australia's most recognised home fragrance brands. And I now run Luxaroma, where we manufacture and supply premium fragrance to thousands of product makers globally. In this episode, I'm pulling back the curtain on the three biggest things traditional fragrance houses get wrong: secret dilution, supply chain instability, and selling fragrance they've never actually tested in a product. If you're buying fragrance for your business, you need to hear this. Starting with the biggest issue, and the one that most people in this industry don't want to talk about: dilution. One of the most common practices I see in traditional fragrance houses is diluting scents with cheap odorless solvents. The most common one is DPG, or dipropylene glycol. First heard about this tactic back in 2010 when we first launched our fragrance house, Luxaroma. An experienced perfumer gave us some advice. The advice was, get the customer using your scent, then each time they reorder, start reducing the strength by adding more solvent, effectively reducing your cost of goods, but also reducing the strength of the fragrance. When I heard this, I was genuinely shocked, and I immediately said, Luxaroma will absolutely never do this. Once we lock in a formulation, we'll never vary the strength. Here's why this practice is so damaging. The dilution often isn't immediately noticeable. The scent profile in the bottle might smell similar. The strength might seem comparable. Often the staff at a candle company just open the bottle and use it without checking. It's not tested or noticed by the decision makers. And then months later, sometimes a year later, your sales drop off. Customers complain that the candles or diffusers aren't as strong as they used to be. By the time the problem's identified, the damage to your brand is already done. Now, I want to be clear about something. Some fragrance formulas do require solvent. This is particularly true for fragrances with a high powder content, especially fragrances that have notes of vanilla. They require vanillin and ethyl vanillin, which come in powder form. These need to be fully dissolved, and a small amount of solvent is necessary to achieve that. That's not dilution, that's actual chemistry. The problem is when solvent is used as a cheap filler to increase volume and reduce cost. And the way to protect yourself from this isn't to guess, it's to ask for documentation. Every legitimate fragrance manufacturer should be able to provide you with safety data sheets and a full specification sheet for every oil they sell. Although you can get the safety data sheet from your supplier, it won't necessarily tell you how much solvent they're actually putting in it. They're going to hide that information, and they're going to hope that you don't notice it, and it's only subtle over time. The problem is when solvent is used as a cheap filler to increase volume and reduce costs, the way to protect yourself and your business from this isn't to guess, and it isn't necessarily to ask for documentation. It's actually to use a reputable fragrance house that has a reputation for strong scents that never change over time. At Luxaroma, if anything, we err on the side of removing solvent wherever possible. As long as the formula still holds everything in solution and performs well, we'd rather sell you a stronger, purer scent. After all, you can always use less of a strong fragrance in your product to get the desired result. That means less cost per unit and fewer stability issues in your finished product. If you have any concerns whatsoever about the strength of your scents changing, you need to look for a new supplier. When looking for a new supplier, you want to look for someone that has credibility, that has reviews. One of the most satisfying things over the years of owning a fragrance house has been when customers say our scents are strong and they're consistent, because that's how we design them. We want them to be strong. We want them to perform well in your products, and we absolutely never change the formulation, so then they're always strong. Another thing you can do is look at fragrances, in particular the individual reviews. As long as they're verified buyer reviews and not ones made up by the supplier, that's going to give you a true indication, are these scents actually performing for other businesses in other products That's going to give you the confidence that they'll perform in your product. The second major mistake traditional fragrance houses make is varying their formulations batch to batch. In the early days of Ecoya, when we were importing scents, we'd sometimes notice variations from one batch to the next. The scent profile would change slightly. The strength would be different. We later learned that this happened primarily because of global shortages of specific raw materials. Instead of holding adequate stock in raw materials, the fragrance house would simply substitute an ingredient without telling us. So one of the things when I launched Luxaroma, I was determined to fix this. And the first thing I changed was the whole supply chain model. Traditional local fragrance houses carry minimal stock of raw materials and order as they need from local resellers. This means they're paying double or triple for materials, and they're vulnerable to any disruption in the supply chain. If a raw material becomes scarce, they substitute. If a reseller runs out, they wait, and you, the customer, bear the consequences. At Luxaroma, we source over 650 raw materials directly from overseas, from the source, and we carry over 12 months of supply. We don't buy from resellers in Australia. This means when there's a global shortage of a specific aromatic compound, we've got time to manage it properly. We're not scrambling to find a substitute and hoping you don't notice. Our number one golden rule at Luxaroma is never mess with the formula. If a raw material becomes permanently unavailable, we don't quietly substitute it. We work with our perfumer to create a new and sometimes improved version. We launch it under a new name and we give our customers time to test and transition. We actually had to do this recently with one of our scents, Sugar Cookie. It wasn't a bad seller, but a key raw material became unavailable. And rather than compromise the formula, we worked with our perfumer to improve it. We made it more punchy, relaunched it under a new name, advised our customers and allowed them time to run out the old stock before switching. That's how it should be done. So on a practical note, ask your fragrance supplier how they manage raw material shortages. Ask them how much stock they carry. If they're buying from local resellers of raw material just in time, then your product consistency is at risk. You won't know about it until your customers start complaining. So supply chain stability matters. But if you don't also consider this final one, you're still missing a critical piece. The third major mistake I see from fragrance houses and resellers is selling scents with no real understanding of how they perform in a final product. They smell a scent on a blotting strip, decide it's great, and sell it for candles. But they've never tested in wax. They've got no idea what wick to recommend. They don't know whether it'll perform differently in soy versus paraffin. They don't know whether it'll cause acceleration in cold processed soap or whether the vanillin content will discolour the product. Our extensive experience founding Ecoya gave us years and years of testing fragrances and waxes for optimal throw, especially in natural waxes like soy. Most fragrance houses don't have this experience. They're chemists, not product makers, and that gap in knowledge is your problem, not theirs. At Luxaroma, when we match a fragrance for a customer, we step through what's in it. How much solvent? What type of solvent? Whether there's anything banned or not. We follow IFRA 100%. We check for phthalates that shouldn't be there. And we discuss enhancements. Can we reduce the solvent further? Can we increase the performance? We also test across different applications. A fragrance that performs well in a candle might need a different formulation for a scent diffuser in a hotel lobby. The solvent requirements are different. The dispersion characteristics are different. That's the level of detail and expertise that gives our customers the best results. A pro tip here is not to buy fragrance from a company that only sells fragrance. Buy from a company that understands manufacturing. Ask them for specific application recommendations for the fragrances you're buying. Ask whether it's been tested in your specific wax type. If they can't answer, they're not the right partner. So to recap, traditional fragrance houses often fail you in three ways. They dilute their oils with cheap solvents and hope you don't notice. They vary their formulations batch to batch due to poor supply chain management. And they sell fragrances without understanding how they actually perform in your product. By understanding these three pitfalls, you can choose a manufacturing partner that prioritizes transparency, consistency, and real-world performance. That's the difference between a supplier and a genuine business partner. If you want to work with a fragrance manufacturer who will never dilute your oil, never vary your formula, and actually understands how fragrance performs in your products, head to luxaroma.com via the link in the description. See you on the next one.